They laughed when I inherited only Grandpa's old boat instead of money and property. I never thought I'd be the guy fighting over a boat that everyone else considered trash. But when Grandpa Henry died last summer, that's exactly what happened. Not that there was much fighting. My siblings were too busy grabbing everything else. It all went down 3 months ago. We gathered at Grandpa's lake house. Me, my older brother Jake, and my sister Karen. The lawyer read Grandpa's with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Jake got Grandpa's red Ford pickup with only 60,000 miles on it. Karen inherited the lake house itself, the place where we'd spent every summer growing up, and his tool collection, the one he'd built over 50 years of working with his hands. They split his savings account pretty much down the middle. And me, I got his old wooden boat. I sat there stunned, waiting for the lawyer to continue. There had to be more, right? Grandpa and I had always been close, closer than he was with Jake or Karen. We'd spent countless hours fishing together, especially after Dad left. He taught me to drive that same Ford that Jake was getting. He'd show me how to use every tool in that collection Karen was inheriting. But the lawyer just folded his papers and asked if there were any questions. That's it. I finally managed. Just the boat? The lawyer nodded apologetically. That's all that's specified for you in the will, son. The look on Jake's face when the lawyer said my name and boat in the same sentence still burns in my memory. That smirk, that eye roll, like I'd been handed a punishment instead of an inheritance. You planning to actually sail that death trap? Jake laughed while twirling the truck keys around his finger. Hope you got good life insurance. Karen wasn't any better. You should have asked for the grill at least. That thing still works. I couldn't understand it. Grandpa knew that boat was practically worthless, at least compared to a lakefront property or a nearly new truck. Yet he'd specifically left it to me in his will. Was he disappointed in me somehow? Was this some kind of final lesson? Or had he simply forgotten how much the boat had deteriorated over the years? After everyone left, I walked alone to the boathouse where Grandpa's boat sat on its trailer, covered with a tarp that had seen better days. Pulling it back felt like peeling away years. The smell hit me first. Old wood, lake water, and that distinct turpentine scent that always clung to Grandpa's clothes. There she was, 12 feet of weathered oak with faded blue paint peeling off like sunburned skin. Cracks ran along the hull where the wood had dried and split. The seats were discolored from years of rain sneaking in to the torn cover. But the steering wheel, that was still solid, like it held on to Grandpa's strength even after he was gone. I ran my fingers over the H carved into the side, Henry's mark. He'd carved it the day he bought the boat back in 1978, before I was even born, before Jake and Karen were born, before any of us knew what kind of man he would become in our lives. Something twisted in my chest when I noticed Jake had already removed Grandpa's fishing gear that used to be stored in the small compartment under the middle seat. Apparently, the will wasn't specific enough about what constituted the boat versus the fishing equipment. I hooked the boat's trailer to my truck anyway. It was already on its special boat trailer. At least Grandpa had kept that in decent shape. The whole setup groaned as I secured the hitch, maybe in protest or maybe appreciation that someone was finally paying attention. As I checked the straps one last time, memories flooded back like water through those hull cracks. Summer evenings on Lake Mitchell. Grandpa letting 8-year-old me take the wheel. Listen to the water. Boy, she's always telling the truth. His calloused hand over mine, guiding the boat through gentle waves as the sunset turned everything gold. The stories he'd tell about the monster fish that lived in the deepest part of the lake. How I'd squeal with a mix of terror and delight when he'd suddenly point and shout, "There it is," though I never saw anything but ripples. Those memories taste different now. Sweeter but sharper. Like good whiskey that burns going down but leaves warmth behind. It wasn't just Grandpa in those memories. There was Emma, too, my high school sweetheart who would sneak out with me to take the boat out under the stars. Her laugh when I tried to be romantic but nearly tip us over. The way her hair caught moonlight when we'd drift aimlessly, talking about futures we thought we'd share. She left for college in California and never came back to our small Michigan town. Sometimes I think I can still hear her laugh and the creaking of the oars. As I was hitching up the boat trailer, my buddy Mike drove by in his shiny new Jeep. He slowed down, window rolling down as his country music blared. Holy crap, man. You prepping for the zombie apocalypse with that thing. He gestured at the boat with his beer can. What's your survival plan? Float away from the walking dead. I laughed, though there was a lump in my throat. Nah, just restoring a piece of family history. Good luck with that project. You'll need it. He drove off, leaving me in a cloud of dust and doubt. The next day, I towed the boat home to my place, a small house with a garage big enough for this new project. Jake called just as I was unloading. Hey, little brother, reality check. That boat's gonna cost more to fix than it'll ever be worth. Grandpa must have had a good laugh, leaving you that floating coffin, while I got the truck and Karen got the house. I let him talk while I examined the weathered hull. There's something about old things that new things don't have. They're not just objects. They're vessels for memories, for moments that shaped us. Things don't just break. They wait for someone to remember their story. Karen stopped by that afternoon, driving her Mercedes SUV that always looks out of place in our hometown. She stood in my driveway, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, staring at Grandpa's boat like it was a dead animal. What are you even going to do with it? It's going to be a complete waste of time. I still can't believe Grandpa left you just this old thing. Maybe he thought you were the only one sentimental enough to keep it instead of selling it for scrap. I didn't answer right away. I was calculating how many weekends it would take me to sand down the hull, how much marine-grade varnish I'd need, where I could find replacement wood for the worst sections. I'm going to make it float again, I finally said. She sighed, that sigh she perfected since high school, the one that says I'm being childish and sentimental. But she doesn't remember how Grandpa would take me out fishing when Dad left. She was already in college by then. She missed those quiet mornings when he taught me that patience isn't just waiting. It's finding peace in the waiting. Whatever. Don't come asking for money when this project drains your savings. She left with a wave that felt more like dismissal than goodbye. That night, I sat in my garage with a beer, just looking at the boat. Why did Grandpa leave it to me specifically? Was it because I was the only one who ever showed interest in it? Or was there something more? It seemed so unfair on the surface. Jake get a $30,000 truck. Karen gets a lakefront property worth $500,000, and I get a rotting boat that would cost thousands to repair. It didn't add up. The boat seemed to hold secrets in its weathered frame, like it was more than just wood and faded paint. It felt like a message from Grandpa, but I couldn't quite decode it yet. I remembered how particular he was about this boat, how he'd get annoyed if we stepped in with muddy shoes, how he had a special cover for it during winter storage, how he refused to sell it even when he bought that nicer fiberglass fishing boat that Karen sold immediately after the funeral. There was something about this old wooden boat that mattered to him, and now, for some reason, he wanted it to matter to me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Before my shift at the auto parts store, I went straight to the garage and turned on the lights. The boat sat there, looking sad and magnificent at the same time. I ran my hand along the side, feeling every crack and imperfection. This was going to be more than a restoration project. This was a conversation with my grandfather, continued beyond his death. Why this boat, Grandpa? I whispered to the empty garage. What will you try to tell me? I grabbed a notepad and started making lists. Sandpaper, marine varnish, wood filler, new screws, fabric for the seats. This would take months, maybe longer. It would drain my weekends and my wallet. But as I started clearing out the leaves and debris that had collected in the bottom of the boat, I heard Grandpa's voice in my head clear as day. Start small, boy. Every big job is just a bunch of small jobs wearing a trench coat. I smiled at that. It was exactly the kind of folksy wisdom he'd drop while teaching me bait a hook or tie a special knot. The kind of saying that seems simple until life proves how deep it really runs. As I swept out the last of the leaves, something caught my eye, a darker patch of wood near the stern, newer than the rest. Had Grandpa repaired this section? It looked like it had been replaced maybe 10 years ago, while the rest of the boat was original. Curious. Another mystery about this boat that everyone else had written off as junk. I heard Karen's voice in my head as I closed up a garage to head to work. Waste of time. But stronger than her voice was Grandpa's. Start, boy. Just start. So I did. I turned off the garage light, locked up, and headed to work with sawdust still clinging to my hands. Tomorrow I begin sanding. The real work. The resurrection of something everyone else had given up on. Everyone except Grandpa. And now me. The real work began that weekend. I cleared out my entire garage, pushing my Chevy to the driveway where it would stay for the foreseeable future. The boat needed space, and so did I. First order of business. Assessment. I circled the vessel, notebook in hand, cataloging every crack, split, and rot spot. There were more than I initially thought. The port side had water damage near the waterline. 3 ribs needed replacing. The transom had soft spots that wouldn't hold screws anymore. And the seats, well, they were beyond saving. This wasn't going to be a quick weekend project. This was going to be a relationship. I started with YouTube tutorials. Turns out there's an entire community of wooden boat restorers out there, mostly older guys with gray beards and endless patience. I watched hours of videos on marine plywood, epoxy techniques, and West System resins. Made lists of supplies that would strain my credit card. But I didn't care. Home Depot became my second home. The guys in the lumber department started greeting me by name. "How's the boat coming, Chief?" they'd ask, and I'd show them pictures on my phone like a proud parent. The first real challenge was sanding. I borrowed an orbital sander from work, but most of it had to be done by hand to avoid damaging the good wood. Hour after hour, I'd run sandpaper over cracked planks, dust filling my lungs despite the mask, arms burning from the repetitive motion. My hands weren't made for this. They're auto parts store hands, good at scanning inventory and counting change. Not craftsman hands like Grandpa's. His were steady, strong, shaped by decades of making and fixing. Mine were soft, with paper cuts from flipping through catalogs. But day by day, those hands got tougher. Calluses formed where blisters had been. I could feel the wood grain now, read it like Braille. This plank was healthy. That one, hiding rot beneath the surface. This section needed gentle persuasion. That one required force. I wasn't just working on the boat was working on me. Jake kept sending Titanic memes to my phone. The first few stung, but by the 5th or 6th, they became predictable. A sinking ship with my face photoshopped onto it. My heart will go on parody about a doomed boat restoration. Low-hanging fruit, really. The last one showed Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet at the bow, but with my face and the text, "King of the Fools." I didn't respond. Some silences speak louder than words. Kara was more subtle, but no less cutting. She called every few days with that syrupy voice she uses on clients. "Just checking in, little brother. How's that project going? Do you need me to spot you some cash? I just worry about your savings." What she really meant was, "When are you going to give up?" Even at work, the whispers followed me. I'd catch fragments between inventory checks. Spending all his money on that rotting, could have bought a new one for less. Something wrong with his head since the old man died. I learned to let the comments roll off my back like water off a freshly varnished hull. 3 weeks in, I had stripped the boat down to bare wood. The golden oak grain emerged from beneath years of neglect, telling a story of storms weathered and sunny days enjoyed. Each ring in the wood was a year in this boat's life. Each scar memory. The next day, I decided to clean out my cluttered storage shed to make room for the new supplies I'd need. That's when I found Grandpa's toolbox. It was tucked away in the back corner, behind years of accumulated junk I'd never sorted through. Kara must have dropped it off after clearing out Grandpa's workshop, without even telling me. A red metal box, dinged and scratched, with Henry painted in white on the side. Inside were specialized tools I hadn't even known existed. Spoke shaves, Japanese pull saws, antique with planes, and a set of carving knives wrapped in oilcloth. Beneath them, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses in a worn leather case. I slipped the glasses on, just to see. The world blurred. His prescription was strong. But for a moment, I swear I could see everything as he had. The boat wasn't broken, it was unfinished. The work wasn't a burden, it was a conversation. I could almost smell his Old Spice aftershave and hear him humming Johnny Cash's I Walked the Line, as he always did when concentrating. Take your time, but never stop. I heard his voice say as clearly as if he were standing behind me. The glasses became my good luck charm. I'd hang them on a hook by the workbench, a silent supervisor for my amateur efforts. My neighbor Bob started popping by almost daily. He'd lean against a garage door frame, coffee mug in hand, offering commentary no one asked for. That an ark or a coffin for your common sense? He asked one morning, eyeing my progress. Depends on whether it floats or sinks. I replied without looking up. One Wednesday evening, while applying marine epoxy to a particularly stubborn crack, I knocked over a can of blue paint. It splashed across my new sneakers, transforming them into a Jackson Pollock original. Well, I muttered to the empty garage, guess I'm a modern Picasso now. The quiet laugh that followed wasn't mine. I spun around so fast I nearly fell over. Standing in the open garage door was a ghost from my past. Emma. Her hair was shorter now, cut in a stylish bob instead of long waves I remembered. But her eyes were the same, that particular shade of green that reminded me of lake water in the summer. Still talking to yourself, I see, she said with a slight smile. My brain short-circuited. This woman had been living rent-free in my head for years, and now she was standing in my garage like no time had passed, like she hadn't moved across the country and disappeared from my life. Emma, what are you? When did you get back? Last week. Mom's not doing great. Hip replacement. I'm helping out for a few months. Her eyes drifted past me to the boat, widening in recognition. Is that Henry's boat? She stepped closer, running her fingers along the freshly sanded gunnel. I can't believe you kept it all these years. I didn't. Grandpa did. He left it to me when he died 3 months ago. Something unreadable passed across her face. Oh, I'm sorry about Henry. He was always kind to me. The silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history. So you're restoring it? She asked finally. Trying to. Not sure I know what I'm doing half the time. She smiled, that same smile that used to make my teenage heart skip beats. You still believe in saving things that everyone else gives up on, don't you? Her presence gave the work a different weight. Someone from the past who remembered the boat as it was, who had shared those summer nights on the water. She stayed for an hour, sitting on an upturned bucket, asking questions about the restoration. I found myself explaining techniques I'd learned as if I were an expert, not someone who'd been watching YouTube tutorials for 3 weeks. When she left, she promised to check in again. I tried not to read too much into it. People say things they don't mean all the time, and Emma was only in town temporarily anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma seeing the boat, seeing me covered in sawdust and paint. What did she think? Did she pity me? Was her visit just courtesy to an old friend? More importantly, why did I care so much? The next morning, I found myself working with renewed energy. I carefully measured and cut replacement planks for the worst sections. Each piece had to be shaped just right. Too tight, and it would warp. Too loose, and water would seep in. I'd never been a patient person. As a kid, I'd rush through homework, bolt down meals, sprint rather than jog. But this boat was teaching me the art of slow progress. You can't rush woodworking. The material sets the pace. Sometimes fixing something is about more than just the thing itself. It's about fixing yourself. It's painful, it's slow, but without it, you'll never be whole. I thought about that as I carefully fitted a new oak rib into place. My life had been on autopilot for years. Same job, same routine, same emptiness since Dad left and Emma moved away. Maybe this boat wasn't just something to fix. Maybe it was fixing me too. Friday night, I was at the auto parts store when my manager Jerry cornered me in the brake pad aisle. Mike says, "You're rebuilding a vintage wooden boat?" I nodded, bracing for another round of gentle mockery. My uncle restored wooden Chris crafts. Beautiful work. Takes dedication. He paused. Listen, if you need more flexible hours while you're working on it, We can arrange something. Sometimes support comes from the most unexpected places. By week 5, I'd replaced a transom and 3 ribs. The structural work was coming along, though my bank account was feeling the strain. Marine-grade lumber isn't cheap, and neither is quality epoxy. But every time I ran my hand along a freshly restored section, feeling the smooth, solid wood where rot had been, it felt worth it. The boat was coming back to life under my hands. Each sanded plank revealed a golden glow that had been hiding beneath years of neglect. It was like archaeology, uncovering what had always been there, just waiting for someone to care enough to look. Emma started stopping by regularly, sometimes with coffee, once with sandwiches from the deli where we used to go as teenagers. She never stayed long, but each visit left me more confused than the last. "You know what I love about this?" she said one evening, gesturing at the boat. "Most people would have sold it for scrap or left it to rot, but you see something in it that's worth saving." Her eyes met mine, and I wondered if we were still talking about the boat. That night, I worked late. The garage was quiet except for the classic rock station playing softly in the background and the rhythmic scrape of sandpaper on wood. Around midnight, I began tapping along the hull, checking for soft spots I might have missed. Near the stern, one section sounded different. Not soft or rotten, just hollow, like there was empty space where there shouldn't be. I tapped again. Definitely different. I ran my hands over the area, feeling for irregularities. That would look the same as the surrounding planks, but it was newer. The grain pattern didn't quite match. The stain was a slightly different shade, something only noticeable now that I'd stripped away years of grime. When I looked closer, I could see tiny screw holes that had been filled and sanded down. This section had been replaced, and recently too, maybe within the last 10 years. The next morning, Emma showed up with donuts. She found me staring at that section of the hull. "What's wrong?" she asked, following my gaze. "This part's been replaced. Recently, and it sounds hollow when I tap it." She stepped closer, curious. "Like there's a compartment?" "Maybe, but who builds a hidden compartment in a boat hull?" Emma smiled. "A man with a secret, that's who." We spent the next hour inspecting the section together. Her fingers were more nimble than mine, finding the almost invisible seam where the newer would met the original planking. "Your grandfather was meticulous," she said admiringly. "Most people would never notice this. Most people wouldn't spend weeks staring at every inch of boat," I countered. As Emma was leaving, she paused in the doorway. "You know, I think you'll find more in this boat than you expect." Her words mingled with Grandpa's voice in my head. "Look deeper, boy." As soon as her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed a pry bar. My heart was pounding as I approached the mysterious section of hull. Whatever Grandpa had hidden, he'd meant for me to find it. Otherwise, why leave me the boat? The wood resisted at first. I was careful, not want to damage the hull I'd spent weeks restoring. I worked the edge of the pry bar into the nearly invisible seam, applying gentle pressure. Something shifted slightly. I adjusted my grip and tried again. With a soft cracking sound, the section moved. It wasn't just a replaced plank. It was a cover for something else entirely. My hands were shaking as I set down the pry bar and prepared to discover what my grandfather had hidden within his beloved boat. What secret had been waiting all these years for someone who cared enough to look? My hands trembled as I removed the last screw holding the mysterious panel in place. The section of hull, about 2 feet long and a foot wide, came away easier than I expected. Different wood, different craftsmanship. This wasn't original to the boat. The space behind it was dark. I grabbed my phone and switched on a flashlight. There, nestled in a cavity carved into the framework of the boat, lay something wrapped in what looked like an old oilcloth. The fabric was dark with years of boat oil and resin, sealed with twine tied in a knot I recognized immediately. A bowline, Grandpa's favorite. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I carefully lifted the bundle out. It was heavier than it looked, solid and cylindrical, about the size of a thermos, but made of metal beneath the cloth. Tarnished brass, maybe? I carried it to my workbench with the reverence of someone handling an unexploded bomb. Methodically, I untied the knot, unwinding the twine and peeling back the oilcloth. The smell hit me. That peculiar mix of machine oil and thyme that always seemed to cling to Grandpa's workshop. Inside was a metal tube, once shiny brass, but now dull with age, capped at both ends. For a moment, I just stared at it. What was this? Some kind of time capsule? A container for important documents? Maybe just a waterproof storage tube for fishing maps? Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory. This boat is more than wood and paint, boy. He'd said that so many times over the years that it had become just another of his sayings. But now the words took on new meaning. Was this what he meant? Was I building myself up for disappointment? What if it contained nothing important? Just some old fishing licenses or forgotten tackle? I twisted the cap. It resisted at first, then gave way with a satisfying pop that sent my heart racing again. I tipped the tube, and 3 items slid out onto the weathered surface of my workbench. A folded piece of paper, a small brass key that looked antique, and a leather-bound notebook with frayed edges. The handwriting on the front of the folded paper was unmistakable. The same tight, slanted script that had labeled every jar in Grandpa's workshop, every Christmas present under the tree. My name was written there, nothing else. I unfolded the letter with careful fingers, as if it might disintegrate under my touch. To my boy, it began, "If you're reading this, you didn't give up on the old boat. You saw value where others saw junk. You found my heart." My vision blurred. I had to stop and take a breath before continuing. "You were always different from the others. You listened. You watched. You cared about the things most people throw away. That's why I left you the boat. Not as a joke, not as an afterthought, but as a test." A test? My mind raced. All those weeks of sanding and scraping, replacing rotten wood and rusted screws, that was some kind of test? I read on, Grandpa's voice clear in my head with every word. "The key opened safe deposit box number 42 at First National on Main Street. What you find there is yours because you earned it. You didn't inherit it. You discovered it. There's a difference." The last lines hit me hardest. Trust yourself more than you trust others. Even family, especially family. You're the one who didn't give up. I sat back, stunned. The letter in my hands felt impossibly heavy for a single sheet of paper. I reached for the notebook next, opening to the first page. It was a boat log. Dates, weather conditions, maintenance notes, all in Grandpa's handwriting, spanning decades. But between these practical entries were personal notes. Thoughts. Reflections. A diary disguised as a logbook. An entry from 1995 caught my eye. "Took the boy fishing today. Only 8 years old, and already sees things others miss. He'll understand when he's older." Flipping through the pages, I found more references to me, spanning years. The boy noticed a heron's nest no one else saw. He asked why water leaves rings on wood. Good question. He's struggling since his dad left. The boat helps. Found him asleep in the boat. Safe harbor in a storm. I hadn't realized how much Grandpa had been watching me, how much he'd seen. The last few entries were from just months before he died. Doctor says it's spreading. Not much time left. Jake wants to sell the boat. Told him it's not for sale. Hidden what matters. The right person will find it. The boy, not a boy anymore, will know what to do. The final entry, dated just 2 weeks before he passed. All set now. The boat holds my legacy. Not money, not property. Understanding. I set the notebook down and picked up the small brass key. It looked old-fashioned, the kind you'd see in movies about bank robberies from the 1930s. The kind that opened something important. My phone rang, startling me. Emma's name flashed on the screen. For a second, I hesitated. This discovery felt private, something between me and Grandpa, but I wanted to share it with someone who'd understand. "Hey," I answered, trying to sound normal. "How's the boat coming?" Her voice was warm, comfortable, like an old sweatshirt you find in the back of your closet. "I found something," I said, surprised at myself at how steady my voice was. Grandpa left. Something hidden in the boat. A letter. A key to a safe deposit box. Seriously? That's wow. What's in the box? I don't know yet. I'm heading to the bank tomorrow. I wanted to tell her everything, but something held me back. Grandpa's warning about family echoed in my mind. Emma wasn't family, but still, this felt like a journey I needed to start alone. That's incredible, she said after I gave her a condensed version. Henry always was mysterious. Any ideas what might be in there? I laughed, some of the tension breaking. Knowing Grandpa could be a secret beer recipe. Or just a note saying, "Good job, kiddo." Or buried treasure, she teased. After we hung up, her voice lingered in my head like a song you can't stop humming. It felt good to have her back in my life, even temporarily. But my focus returned to the items on my workbench, physical pieces of Grandpa that I never expected to find. I picked up the notebook again, leafing through more carefully. Toward the back, one page had been marked with a small ink star. The entry was brief. Box number 42, First National, for the one who saves a boat. Below it was a sketch, not a boat, but of what looked like a document. Stock certificates? I couldn't be sure. Whatever Grandpa had left in that safe deposit box, he considered it important enough to hide the key in his beloved boat, knowing only someone who truly cared would find it. Secrets don't hide in treasures. They hide in things you love enough not to abandon. That's where the real value lives, not in what something is worth, but in what it means to you. I stayed up late that night, reading through the notebook cover to cover. It was like having conversations with Grandpa that I never got to have. His thoughts on life, on family, on the passing of time, all hidden between maintenance logs and fishing records. There were practical notes, too. The exact mixture of stain he'd used on the boat, where to find replacement brass fittings, tips for keeping the oak from drying out too much in winter storage. Why hadn't he just told me all this? Why the elaborate hiding place and secret key? The answer came in one of his entries. People value what they discover more than what they're given. That's why I never tell a boy where the fish are. Let him find them himself. Classic Grandpa, turning everything into a lesson. Even from beyond the grave, he was teaching me. I remembered how he'd taught me to hold a hammer, standing behind me with his calloused hands guiding mine. How he'd laugh when I missed a nail, not mockingly, but with genuine joy at watching me learn. Every missed nail is a lesson in where not to aim, he'd say. Morning couldn't come fast enough. I barely slept, the brass key sitting on my nightstand where I could see it whenever I opened my eyes. By 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and headed back to the garage. In the early morning light, the boat looked different. Not just a restoration project anymore, but a message from Grandpa, a bridge between us. I ran my hand along the freshly sanded gunnel and whispered, "You crafty old man." I'd noticed a hidden panel because I'd been committed to doing the restoration right. Sanding every inch down to fresh wood, applying new varnish to every surface. If I'd taken shortcuts, I might never have found it. The old paint had concealed the seams perfectly. Only by stripping everything away did the truth become visible. It was like Grandpa had been watching me all along, nodding in approval, as I worked my way toward a secret he knew only I would find. First National Bank opened at 9 a.m. I was waiting outside at 8:45, the key burning a hole in my pocket. The security guard gave me a curious look as I paced back and forth in front of the entrance. When they finally unlocked the doors, I was the first customer of the day. The teller, a middle-aged woman named Debbie according to her nameplate, greeted me with practiced cheerfulness. "Safe deposit box access," I said, pulling out the key. "Number 42. Debbie's professional smile never wavered, but her eyes showed a flicker of recognition. "Number 42? That's one of our oldest boxes. I'll need to see your ID and we'll check the access list." I handed over my driver's license, anxiety building. What if my name wasn't on the list? What if Grandpa had forgotten that crucial detail? She tapped at her computer, then looked up. "Henry Callahan's box?" "Yes, here you are. Follow me, please." The safe deposit room was exactly what you'd expect. Sterile, quiet, with rows of metal boxes embedded in the walls. Debbie used her master key along with mine to open box 42. She pulled out a long, narrow metal container, and set it on the private table in the corner. "Take all the time you need," she said, leaving me alone with Grandpa's secret. My hands were steady now as I opened the box. Inside was a manila envelope with my name written on it, and underneath, a small stack of documents. I opened the envelope first. Another letter, longer this time. "Dear boy," it began, "if you're reading this, you've done what I knew you could. You saw value where others saw waste. You put in the work. You found my message." I read on heart pounding. "Back in 1981, when you weren't even born yet, I made a few investments. Nothing fancy. Just a couple of companies that seemed promising. Apple Computer. Microsoft. I put in what I could afford to lose back then. About $5,000 total. Never touched it. Never told anyone. Let it grow." My hands started to shake again. Over the years, those shares split and grew. I set up a trust fund with them, designated for the one who saves a boat. "That's you. Always knew it would be you." I set the letter down and looked at the documents beneath it. Financial statements. Trust paperwork. A statement from a brokerage firm. The number at the bottom of the page made me blink hard. Sure, I was seeing things. $4.8 million. I read it again. And again. The room suddenly felt very small and very hot. Grandpa's letter concluded, "This isn't about the money. It's about seeing what matters. Finding worth in what others discard. You've always had that gift. Now use this to build something good. Something that lasts. Like that old boat." I sat in the bank's private room for nearly an hour, trying to process what had just happened. My mind kept getting stuck on that number. $4.8 million. Finally, I gathered the documents, thanked Debbie who checked on me twice, and walked out into the sunshine feeling like I'd stepped into someone else's life. I drove home in a daze, stopping at a red light that I didn't even remember approaching. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Heard you went to the bank today. Everything okay?" News travels fast in small towns. I didn't respond. When I got home, another message pinged through, from Karen this time. "Let me know if you need help with finances. That's kind of my area." Smiling face. How did they know I'd been to the bank? Who had told them? The same suspicion that had followed me out of the bank followed me into my house. I locked the door, spread the documents on my kitchen table, and read everything 3 times. It was all legitimate, all real. Grandpa had set up a trust with those early tech investments, explicitly for the heir who restores Henry's wooden boat. That night, I couldn't sleep again, but for entirely different reasons. Questions bombarded my brain from all directions. What would I do with this money? Who could I trust? Should I tell anyone? Would this change how people saw me? Would it change me? I found myself in the garage at midnight, sitting in the partially restored boat, Grandpa's notebook in my hands. I flipped to the final entry. All set now. The boat holds my legacy. Not money, not property. Understanding. Understanding. That's what he wanted me to gain. Not just the money. The understanding that value isn't always visible on the surface. That patience and care reveal what's truly important. My phone lit up with a text from Emma. "Can't sleep? Treasure hunters rarely do." I smiled despite everything. Not sleeping. Too much happening. "Want company?" she wrote back. 20 minutes later, she was sitting beside me in the boat, both of us balanced on toolboxes like kids playing pirate ship. I told her everything. About the hidden compartment, the key, the safe deposit box, the trust fund. She listened without interrupting, her face showing surprise, but not the calculating look I'd imagined seeing in others. "Henry was always thinking 10 steps ahead," she said finally. "But why go through all the trouble? Why not just leave you the money directly?" I looked at the boat around us, at the newly exposed with grain and the carefully replaced ribs, at the weeks of work visible in every inch. "Because then it wouldn't have been earned," I said slowly, "and I wouldn't have learned what he wanted to teach me." Emma smiled, understanding in her eyes. "So what are you going to do now? Buy a yacht to replace this old thing?" I laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet garage. "No way. I'm finishing this restoration. I've come too far to stop now. She nodded approvingly. And then I closed Grandpa's notebook, feeling the weight of his wisdom in my hands. First, I'm going to sleep. Then tomorrow, I'm going to bank again. I need to understand exactly what I've got. As she was leaving, Emma paused in the doorway. Don't stay up all night reading that letter again. Even treasure hunters need sleep. After she left, I reread the letter one last time, then carefully placed it back in the metal tube along with the notebook. I kept the key, though, slipping it onto my keyring where it nestled against my house and car keys. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, holding the key in my palm, I felt Grandpa's presence stronger than I had since the funeral. "You crafty old man," I whispered again into the dark garage. "You knew exactly what you were doing." In response, a night breeze rustled through the open door, cool against my face, like a pat on the shoulder, like approval. I locked at the garage and headed inside, the key to Grandpa's legacy heavy in my pocket, my mind already planning my next steps. First National Bank. Tomorrow morning, I needed to see exactly what Grandpa had left me and what responsibilities came with it. In the darkness of my bedroom, I smiled and finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning at First National Bank felt surreal. I sat across from Mr. Grayson, the trust manager, as he walked me through the documents with the practiced calm of someone who regularly deals with life-changing sums of money. To him, this was Tuesday. To me, it was an earthquake. "Your grandfather was quite specific about the conditions," he explained, sliding another form toward me for signature. "The trust transfers entirely to you, but he structured it to minimize tax implications. Smart man." I nodded, still processing. $4.8 million. The number refused to feel real, floating in my consciousness like a dream. "He set this up almost 20 years ago," Mr. Grayson continued, "and he made only one stipulation for accessing the funds, that the beneficiary would be the one who restores Henry's wooden boat." As I signed my name for what felt like the 100th time, the weight of Grandpa's planning hit me. This wasn't a lucky accident. He'd orchestrated everything. The boat inheritance, the hidden compartment, the meticulous record-keeping, all to ensure that only the right person would find his legacy. Not the person who wanted it most, the person who deserved it most. And he never told anyone about this. I asked. Mr. Grayson smiled slightly. "In my experience, the quiet ones are often the most interesting. Your grandfather came in every year to check on the account, always alone. Never mentioned it to anyone. As far as I know, I left the bank with a portfolio folder of documents, a new bank card, and a distinct feeling that my life had irreversibly changed. The parking lot suddenly seemed too ordinary, the sky too normal for what had just happened. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. Jake, again. Then Karen, almost immediately after. News travels fast in small towns, especially news about money. I silenced my phone and drove. Not home, but to the lake. The water was calm that day, reflecting clouds like it was showing off its best mirror work. I sat on the dock where Grandpa used to tie up his boat, our boat, and tried to think. $4.8 million isn't infinite money, but it's life-changing money. It's freedom from worry money. It's do-what-matters money. I watched the herons stalk the shallows, patient and focused. Grandpa used to point them out. See how he waits? Knows exactly what he wants and doesn't rush. That's how you should make big decisions. What would I do with this windfall? Buy a bigger house? Quit my job at the auto parts store? Travel? All the standard lottery winner fantasies paraded through my mind, but none of them felt right. None of them felt like something Grandpa would approve of. The answer came to me as I watched an elderly man struggle to launch a small fishing boat from the public ramp. His movements were careful but strained, his boat showing signs of neglect that probably matched his fixed income. The old boathouse and marina at the north end of the lake had been closed for years, the property sitting vacant, the docks slowly rotting away. I'd always thought it was a shame. It had been a gathering place once, a hub for the lake community. That night, Emma came over with Chinese takeout. We sat in my living room, surrounded by bank documents spread across the coffee table. "So what's the plan, millionaire?" she asked, chopsticks paused midair. "I'm not going to tell Jake or Karen about the money," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "Not yet, anyway." She nodded, like she'd expected nothing less. And I think I'm going to buy the old Wilson Marina property, turn it into something new." The next week passed in a blur of meetings with real estate agents, lawyers, and contractors. The Wilson property wasn't even officially on the market, but a cash offer well above market value has a way of creating opportunities. The old marina, boathouse, and 3 acres of lakefront property will be mine within 30 days. I hired an architect who specialized in renovations of historic lake buildings. We walked the property together, me pointing out what I wanted to preserve, him noting what needed to be completely rebuilt. "What are you going to call it?" he asked as we stood on the creaking main dock. "Hank's Harbor," I said without hesitation. Grandpa had always been Hank to his friends. Henry on paper, Hank in life. Meanwhile, I continued working on our boat. The restoration took on new significance now. Not just a personal project, but the beginning of something bigger. I reinforced the hull, replaced the seats with fresh oak, and applied coat after coat of marine varnish until it glowed honey gold in the sunlight. I carved a fresh H into the bow, deeper and more defined than the old one, added navy blue trim along the gunnels that made the woodwork pop. When I finally stepped back to admire it, the boat looked better than new. It looked loved. The final test came on a warm Saturday morning. I towed the boat to the lake, away from the usual crowded launch areas to a quiet cove Grandpa had shown me years ago. The trailer wheels crunched on the gravel as I backed it down to the water's edge. Heart hammering, I untied the straps and slowly winched the boat into the lake. Would it float? Had I missed something crucial in the restoration? The boat slipped into the water like it was returning home. No leaks. No problems. It bobbed gently, waiting for me, as if it had never been damaged at all. I climbed in carefully, settling onto the newly varnished seat. The wood creaked in greeting, familiar sounds I remember from childhood. Using the oars, I pushed away from shore and into deeper water. For a moment, I just drifted, letting the morning sun warm my face. I could almost feel Grandpa sitting beside me, nodding in approval. The boat wasn't just restored, it was reborn. "We did it, old man," I whispered to the empty air. 3 months later, the sign went up at the renovated marina, Hank's Harbor, Boat Restoration and Community Workshop. The grand opening was written up in a local paper. "Local man revitalizes historic lake property, offers free woodworking classes for kids and veterans." The article mentioned my background, minimal, my experience, mostly self-taught, and my vision, creating a place where people could learn traditional woodworking and boat restoration. It didn't mention the money. I'd been careful about that. The calls from Jake and Karen started almost immediately after the article appeared. Jake's voice had a new tone, part confusion, part forced cheerfulness. "So, a marina, huh? That's a pretty big investment for someone working retail. You must have gotten a serious bank loan." "The boat restoration gave me some new opportunities," I said vaguely. "How's the truck running?" He ignored the question. "Listen, about that old boat, I may have been a little harsh. If you got it floating again, I'd love to see it sometime." Karen was less subtle when she pulled into Hank's Harbor in her Mercedes the following day. She walked to the main workshop where I was helping a Vietnam vet replace planking on his fishing skiff, her designer shoes clacking on the wooden floor. "This is unexpected," she said, looking around at the tools, workbenches, and half-finished projects. "How exactly are you affording all this? Did you get investors or something?" I wiped my hands on a rag, noticing how different they looked now, calloused, stained with varnish, strong in ways they hadn't been before. "Grandpa taught me more than I realized," I said simply. "The boat's finally finished, by the way. It's floating at Dock 3 if you want to see it." She didn't go look at the boat. Neither did Jake when he stopped by the following week with a 6-pack of beer and transparently forced camaraderie. They weren't interested in the boat. They were interested in where the money had come from. I never told them. Some lessons need to be learned firsthand. Hanks Harbor thrived that first summer. Local kids signed up for free woodworking classes where they built their own small craft, birdhouses, toolboxes, even simple paddle boards. Veterans found purpose in restoration projects, their patience and attention to detail, making them natural craftsmen. I hired 3 full-time staff, all local, all passionate about preserving traditional skills. The marina slips filled with boats, the workshop calendar booked, solid with classes. One evening, as sunset painted the lake orange and gold, I stood on the main dock watching a 10-year-old girl carefully sand a boat seat, her face scrunched in concentration exactly as mine must have been all those years ago with Grandpa. "You've built something special here," said a voice behind me. Emma stood there, golden in the fading light. After returning to help her mother recover from surgery, she decided to stay. Found a job teaching at the local elementary school. Started spending more and more time at Hanks Harbor. As the weeks turned to months, we fell into an easy rhythm together. Morning coffee at the marina office, evenings on the deck watching the sunset, weekends exploring flea markets for vintage boat hardware. What had started as reconnection evolved into something deeper. She understood me in ways no one else did. Understood why I'd spent weeks restoring an old boat, why I'd turned down Jake and Karen's son interest, why this place mattered so much. As autumn painted the shoreline in crimson and gold, Emma and I took the boat out almost daily. One evening, with the sunset turned the lake to liquid fire, I realized I couldn't imagine my life without her in it. The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, noticing my silence. "Just thinking about how things change." I replied, 6 months ago I was fixing boat seats in my garage, wondering if I was wasting my time. She smiled. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made. I wasn't just talking about the boat. Our relationship deepened as winter settled over the lake. Emma moved into my house, the same small place I'd had before the inheritance, though we talked about building something on the harbor property eventually. We spent snowy evenings planning summer programs for the workshop, her teacher's mind complimenting my craftsman's hands perfectly. When spring returned, bringing with it the bustle of boating season, I knew it was time. I'd been carrying Grandpa's mother's ring in my pocket for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. On a clear April evening, I suggested taking the boat out to watch the sunset. Emma agreed eagerly. Our first real outing on the water, since winter had released its grip on the lake. The water was still chilly, but the air was warm with promise. I rowed us to the center of the lake, to a spot where the water was deepest and clearest. The same spot where Grandpa had taught me to fish, where Emma and I floated as teenagers, where I'd come alone after finding his letter. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and pink, reflecting off the water in shimmering ribbons of light. In that moment, with the boat gently rocking beneath us, I understood something profound. This boat hadn't just been an inheritance or a test. It had been a thread that connected all the important parts of my life. "What are you smiling about?" Emma asked, her hair catching the last rays of sunlight. "About how an old boat changed everything," I said, reaching for her hand. "You know, when Grandpa left me this boat, everyone thought it was worthless. Just a rotting hull with more problems than potential. Everyone except you," she said softly. "And now look, it brought me back to you. It gave me purpose. It literally changed the course of my life." I pulled the small velvet box from my pocket, my heart hammering harder than it had when launching the freshly restored boat. "Emma, I think Grandpa knew something I didn't. He knew that sometimes the most valuable things are the ones that take work, that need to be restored and cared for, things that have history and meaning." Her eyes widened as I opened the box, revealing the vintage diamond ring that had been my grandmother's. "This boat gave me everything that matters, a connection to my past, a direction for my future. And it brought me back to you. I don't want to let go of any of it, especially you." The question came easily then, in that perfect moment on that imperfect old boat. "Will you marry me?" Her yes echoed across the water, and when we kissed, it felt like completing a circle that had been drawing us together for years. The boat rocked gently beneath us, solid and true, holding our weight and our future together. My neighbor Bob was the first to congratulate us when we returned to the harbor, engaged and glowing. He shook his head in disbelief as I told him I proposed on Grandpa's boat. "From shipwreck to 5 stars," he exclaimed, looking from the boat to the thriving harbor to Emma's ring. "You're some kind of wizard, kid. Never would have thought that pile of kindling could lead to all this." I laughed, one hand resting on Grandpa's old flannel shirt that I'd framed and hung in the main office. "Things are worth what you decide they're worth, Bob." As Hanks Harbor grew, Emma and I established a scholarship fund for the local high school, set up a trust for lake conservation, funded a program to teach traditional crafts at the senior center. We never announced these things, just quietly set them in motion, letting the good spread naturally. I remembered how Grandpa used to tell me, "Do good quietly. It'll speak for itself." His lessons lived on in every board sanded by children's hands, every veteran who found healing in rebuilding something broken. Our wedding took place at the harbor the following summer, with the restored boat serving as a backdrop for our vows. We incorporated wood from the original boat seats into our wedding bands, a reminder of where our journey together had truly begun. Sometimes I sit alone in the office at Hanks Harbor, contemplating how a single decision to restore that old boat instead of scrapping it had transformed everything. If I had been like Jake or Karen, focused only on what things were worth in dollars, I would have missed the true inheritance. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about learning to see beneath the surface, to value what others discard, to restore instead of replace. It was about carrying forward a legacy of patience and craftsmanship in a world that increasingly values only the new and immediate. The true treasure isn't what you find. It's what you pass on without losing yourself in the process. Grandpa understood that. The money wasn't the legacy. The understanding was. I sometimes wonder if he knew exactly how it would all unfold. It is foresight extended to see me standing on this dock with Emma beside me, watching sunset paint the harbor he'd made possible. Probably not the specifics, but I think he knew the shape of it, knew what kind of person he was investing in, what kind of life might grow from the seeds he planted. That old boat didn't just carry me across water. It carried me across time, connecting me to my past and propelling me toward a future I never could have imagined. From something everyone else saw as worthless came everything I now value most: purpose, community, love. Emma and I still take the boat out at least once a week. Sometimes with friends, sometimes just the two of us with Grandpa's memory as our third passenger. The boat cuts through the water as smoothly as it did decades ago, carrying stories in every plank and nail. It doesn't just float, it tells a story. About patience. About seeing value where others see trash. About the things we save that end up saving us. On calm evenings, I wear Grandpa's flannel shirt and take Emma to the middle of the lake. The H on the bow catches a fading light, bold against a navy blue trim. I run my hand along the gunnel, feeling the history beneath my fingers. Not just Grandpa's history now, but mine too. Ours. "Thank you, old man," I whisper as twilight settles over the water. The lake answers with a gentle lapping against the hull. Like a conversation continued across time, like family. And I know with absolute certainty that we are exactly where we're supposed to be,